He may never say it out loud, he may laugh it off, bury it under silence, or hide it behind strength, but behind every man's calm eyes and steady hands is a truth he's carried for years. What he desires most isn't sex, power, or praise. What he truly longs for is something far deeper, far quieter, and far more human. Every human being carries within them a silent ache to be fully accepted as they are. For men, this longing often hides beneath layers of silence, humor, strength, or performance. From a young age, boys are taught that strength means withholding emotion, that success means being in control, and that love must be earned through achievement or usefulness. But inside every man, no matter how confident or composed he appears, is a quiet yearning to be embraced wholly, not just for what he does, but for who he is when all the armor is stripped away. The desire for emotional acceptance is not a surface-level need. It's deep, foundational, and often repressed, even from their own awareness. This need to be accepted comes from years of living with unspoken expectations. A man might be told to be strong, but not too soft, to be kind, but not too sensitive, to lead, but not to question. Slowly, these instructions disconnect him from his authentic emotional world, and yet the hunger to be seen, truly seen, never dies. It stays there in his silence when he feels misunderstood. It appears in moments of intimacy when he hesitates before sharing his real fears. It exists in the pauses between his words, where what he truly wants to say is kept buried under the fear of rejection or being perceived as weak. In relationships, this desire often gets confused. Physical intimacy may become a substitute for emotional closeness, but it never fully satisfies. Many men engage in physical connection, not just for pleasure, but in hopes of feeling accepted, even if just momentarily. But the feeling fades, and what remains is still the longing to be loved without conditions, without roles to play, and without constantly having to perform worthiness. They want to come home not just to a physical place, but to an emotional one where masks are unnecessary and their soul feels welcome. Being accepted means being allowed to feel. It means having space to say, I'm scared, or I don't know what I'm doing, without being told to toughen up or fix it. It means hearing, I still love you, even after revealing the messy, imperfect, vulnerable parts of themselves. Acceptance is not about agreement, it's about presence. It's about standing beside someone, even when their truth is hard to hear. When a man feels that kind of acceptance, he begins to soften. His body relaxes, his voice becomes more honest. He no longer needs to defend his worth or hide his tears. He begins to heal. Many men don't ask for this out loud. Sometimes they don't even realize what they're missing, but they will remember every moment they felt emotionally safe. They remember when they weren't judged for needing rest, when they were allowed to cry without being told to be strong, when they failed and weren't abandoned. These memories stay with them because they are rare and precious. True emotional acceptance does not demand perfection or success. It welcomes the whole person. It says, you are enough. You don't have to earn my love. I see you, I accept you. And you matter not because of what you give or do, but because of who you are. That kind of acceptance is not just desired, it is essential, and it is what men secretly long for far more than anything physical. From early on, boys are often given the message that vulnerability is dangerous, that emotions are to be suppressed, and that strength means silence. They learn to wear masks of humor, or aggression, or detachment, not because they don't feel, but because they're afraid of what might happen if they show what's underneath. As they grow into men, that inner world remains rich with emotion, but it stays hidden. Not because they lack the capacity to express, but because the world around them rarely gives them permission to be fully open. What men truly crave, often even more than physical intimacy, is the ability to be vulnerable in a space that feels emotionally safe, a place where they can take off the armor without fear of attack, ridicule, or abandonment. This kind of safety isn't created through words alone. It comes through consistency, patience, and presence. A man begins to feel safe when he realizes he won't be shamed for expressing confusion, sadness, or fear. In a world where he's constantly expected to lead, protect, and perform, the moments he's allowed to admit he's unsure or overwhelmed become a kind of emotional sanctuary. But those moments are rare. Too often, when a man begins to open up, he is met with discomfort, impatience, or even criticism. He may be told he's too emotional, not man enough, or that he should just fix it and move on. So he closes up again, not because he doesn't want to share, but because experience has taught him it's safer to hide. This creates a deep and silent longing inside, a yearning for a relationship or connection where he doesn't have to second-guess every word or emotion, where he's allowed to be human, not just a provider or protector. He wants to share what keeps him up at night. The doubts about whether he's good enough, the shame from past failures, the weight of responsibilities he carries silently. But only if he knows those things won't be used against him later. Trust is everything, and without emotional safety, trust cannot grow. In safe vulnerability, he's not looking for someone to solve his problems. He's not even asking for reassurance. What he wants is someone to sit with him in his truth, to hear him without trying to correct or fix him, to accept his emotional world, even when it's messy. He wants to feel like his pain isn't too much, his fears aren't too strange, and his sadness isn't a burden. And when that happens, when he is allowed to be raw and still feel loved, something profound shifts inside him. He becomes more open, more present, and more connected, not because someone demanded it of him, but because someone made it safe to be that way. Many men don't have the words for this need. It often comes out sideways through silence, withdrawal, frustration, or even overworking. But the root is the same, a desire to be seen and accepted in their most honest emotional form. It's not weakness they're hiding. It's tenderness. It's the fragile parts that have never had space to breathe. And when those parts are finally met with compassion, not judgment, healing begins. In that space of emotional safety, a man no longer has to perform strength. He discovers that true strength lies in being known fully and still being loved. That's what they desire most, even if they never say it. Every man, no matter how stoic or self-assured he may appear, carries within him a deep need to feel respected and significant. This desire isn't rooted in arrogance or ego. It's connected to his sense of identity, worth, and place in the world. From a young age, many men are conditioned to believe that their value lies in what they can do, what they can achieve, or what they can offer to others. They're often praised for their performance, their strength, and their reliability, but rarely for their presence, their emotional insight, or their quiet contributions. Over time, this shapes the internal message that being worthy means being useful, capable, or ahead. As they move through life, this belief follows them into relationships, careers, and personal goals. When a man feels respected, he feels safe to contribute, to love, and to serve. Respect becomes the mirror that reflects back his identity. It tells him that his efforts are noticed, that his presence matters, and that he is enough, not because he is perfect, but because he shows up and gives the best of who he is. And this sense of significance does not always require grand gestures or praise. Sometimes it lives in small things, being listened to when he speaks, being trusted with decisions, being appreciated for the quiet sacrifices he makes without announcing them. However, when this respect is absent or conditional, something inside him begins to close. The man who feels ignored, criticized, or constantly second-guessed begins to doubt his worth. Even if he doesn't say it aloud, he begins to wonder if what he brings is ever enough. In romantic relationships, this can show up as withdrawal, irritation, or emotional distance. Not because he doesn't care, but because he feels unseen. When his efforts go unnoticed, when his voice is dismissed, or when he feels like he's always falling short in someone else's eyes, he starts to question why he should keep trying. On the other hand, when a man is genuinely respected, not for status, not for perfection, but for the truth of who he is, his energy shifts. He stands taller. He becomes more emotionally generous. He listens more, gives more, and leads not from a place of dominance, but from deep connection. Respect is the soil in which his confidence grows. It is what allows him to be both strong and soft, assertive and gentle. When someone looks at him and sees not just what he does, but who he is, he feels significant in a way that physical attraction or material success can never match. Being significant to someone also means being a priority, not just an option. It means knowing that he matters even on his worst days, that his presence makes a difference, that he's not being compared, minimized, or tolerated, but that he's valued and chosen. This longing for significance isn't about being worshipped or placed on a pedestal. It's about mutual regard. It's about the feeling that his efforts, thoughts, and emotions are respected, even when they're imperfect. When a man feels this kind of recognition, he naturally becomes more vulnerable and more loving and more available, not because he was asked to, but because respect unlocks something within him that has longed to be expressed. For many men, this silent desire to be respected and to know they are significant means more than words can capture. They may not speak it, but they feel it deeply. And when this need is fulfilled, they thrive. They don't just function, they flourish. Because to a man, feeling respected is not just a preference, it's a form of emotional nourishment. It reminds him that his life has meaning, that his presence is valued, and that he is not invisible in the places that matter most. Trust is one of the most vital and fragile threads in a man's emotional world. While much attention is given to physical loyalty in relationships, what men deeply yearn for is emotional loyalty. The kind of trust that runs deeper than actions, living in words, consistency, tone, and presence. This need isn't always easy to articulate, and it often goes unnoticed until it's broken. But it is there, rooted in a man's need to feel emotionally safe, prioritized, and chosen, not just in moments of celebration or intimacy, but in the quiet, ordinary spaces of connection. A man desires to know that the person beside him is emotionally present, that they don't just occupy the same room, but also inhabit the same emotional space. This emotional loyalty shows up in many subtle ways. It's in how someone speaks about him when he isn't in the room. It's in whether his vulnerabilities are held with care or exposed to others for judgment. It's in the tone used during moments of conflict, whether the intention is to wound or to understand. Men listen for this loyalty in silence. They watch for it in moments when they feel small or uncertain. They pay attention to whether their emotional truth is met with support or with distance. While they may not always verbalize what they feel, they sense the difference between being emotionally trusted and emotionally tolerated. When a man feels emotionally betrayed, not necessarily through infidelity, but through broken trust in his emotional space, he begins to retreat. It may look like shutting down, becoming irritable, or staying distracted, but beneath that is a deep disappointment and grief. He begins to wonder if it's safe to share himself again. He questions whether his emotional openness is worth the risk of being misunderstood or judged. So this doesn't mean he stops caring. It often means he cares so much that he cannot bear to reopen wounds that were never acknowledged or healed. His silence becomes armor, not because he lacks depth, but because he no longer trusts the space to hold it. On the other side, when emotional loyalty is present, a man flourishes. He becomes more grounded, more expressive, and more engaged. He leans into the relationship with a sense of safety that allows him to give more of himself without fear of punishment or manipulation. He feels chosen again and again, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. It tells him he's not alone in the experience of his inner world, that someone is not just standing beside him, but walking with him, choosing him not only during high points, but in his most unpolished moments. That kind of loyalty is rare, it cannot be faked, and it cannot be demanded. It is built through presence, truthfulness, and shared vulnerability. When a man receives emotional loyalty, he responds with emotional investment. He begins to give in the ways he wished he could long ago. He shares more, not because someone pulled it out of him, but because the space has become a place where he can breathe without fear. Loyalty for him isn't just about promises kept, but about being emotionally held with consistency. It means being trusted with someone's emotions and knowing his will be honored in return. It means not being shamed for what he feels, but being welcomed deeper because of it. This form of loyalty becomes his foundation. It tells him he matters not for what he can do or fix, but for who he is when he reveals the unguarded truth. It becomes the space where he is not just heard, but truly understood, and in that understanding he finds peace. Emotional loyalty, though often invisible to the outside world, becomes the most powerful affirmation he can receive. It grounds him. It gives him the courage to open, to love, and to trust again, not just in others, but in himself. There is a part of every man that longs to be a source of strength and inspiration for someone else. This desire is not rooted in control or superiority, but in a deep, instinctive need to be needed, to be seen as valuable, impactful, and essential in the life of someone he loves. Many men may not voice this openly, but they carry it quietly, like a compass guiding their actions, choices, and emotional investments. The idea of being a hero is not about rescuing or dominating. It's about feeling like his presence makes a meaningful difference, that he brings something into someone's life that no one else can. It's about significance through service, value through contribution, and identity through emotional relevance. When a man feels like he's a hero in someone's eyes, he becomes more than his roles. He sees himself as strong, not because of physical power, but because he's trusted, appreciated, and needed. This dynamic begins early in life, when young boys feel a rush of purpose from helping, fixing, or protecting. Over time, that simple desire matures into something emotional and soulful. In intimate relationships, it translates into wanting to support emotionally, to show up consistently, to bring stability in times of chaos, and to inspire belief when someone is in doubt. He wants to be the person his partner turns to, not just when things are going well, but when things fall apart. That kind of emotional responsibility isn't a burden to him when he knows he's valued, it becomes his calling. But when that space is taken away, when he feels unneeded, replaced, or emotionally irrelevant, it shakes him at his core. He begins to question not just the relationship, but himself. He may still perform his duties, but something begins to close. When his efforts are dismissed, his gestures go unnoticed, or his presence is taken for granted, it sends a message that he no longer holds that sacred place. That quiet withdrawal isn't apathy, it's heartbreak. It's the emotional result of no longer feeling like his love, his effort, or his presence creates warmth or security. And yet he will rarely say this out loud, because to do so feels like admitting defeat or begging for value. The longing to be a hero is deeply emotional. It's about being a stabilizing force when the world feels unsteady. It's about being a person who brings peace in times of inner turmoil, who holds steady when things are falling apart. A man doesn't want to be admired from a distance. He wants his impact to be felt deeply and personal. He wants to know that when he listens, when he gives, when he stays, it matters. That he is not just appreciated occasionally, but that his presence brings emotional safety, hope, and direction, that to someone he is irreplaceable. This desire also fuels his growth. When a man feels like a hero, he rises. He begins to lean into his best qualities: patience, leadership, humility, and emotional strength. He pushes himself not because of pride, but because he knows he is seen and trusted. He learns to love not just through words, but through consistent acts of presence. That role inspires him to heal, to evolve, and to protect not just the person he loves, but the connection they share Being a hero in someone's eyes doesn't require grand gestures or perfection. It requires recognition. It requires space to lead with love and the trust that his heart, when offered openly, will not be rejected. It's the quiet belief that who he is, not just what he does, brings light, comfort, and purpose to another's life. And when he feels that, he doesn't just show up. He gives everything not out of obligation, but out of the quiet joy of finally being where he was always meant to be. There is a longing within every man to be chosen, not for what he accomplishes, not for how strong he appears, and not for what he provides, but simply for who he is. This desire often remains hidden beneath layers of responsibility, performance, and silence. From an early age, many men are taught to attach their value to output, to how much they can earn, how well they can perform, how steady they can remain under pressure. Slowly, their identity becomes wrapped in function, in contribution, and in being needed for tasks, rather than cherished for their essence. But beneath that conditioning, a deeper truth lives. Every man wants to be seen as worthy just by being. Not for his resume, not for his strength, not for his ability to carry others, but for the simple fact of his existence. To be chosen for who he is means being loved in his unguarded, unpolished state. It means not having to carry the weight of constant performance just to maintain closeness or affection. It means knowing that if he stops achieving, if he loses status, or if he has a day where he cannot fix or provide, he will still be met with warmth instead of distance. For a man, this kind of acceptance can be life-changing. In a world that constantly demands that he prove himself, the quiet act of being chosen again and again, without conditions, is a sanctuary for his spirit. It reassures him that he is more than what he produces, that he has emotional and relational value that doesn't fade with circumstances. His need often reveals itself in small moments, when he shares something vulnerable and is met with presence rather than discomfort, when he fails and isn't shamed for it, when he takes off the mask of strength and is still seen as dependable and whole. These experiences may seem minor, but they register deeply. They tell him that love is not being rationed based on his perfection. They show him that he doesn't have to be constantly useful to be emotionally safe. This is what he truly wants, to stop feeling like he has to earn affection, to know that he is not on trial every day, silently evaluated based on what he can deliver. When a man feels that he is chosen for who he is, something inside him softens. He becomes more emotionally available, more expressive, more trusting. He begins to show sides of himself that may have been hidden for years. The playful, the unsure, the creative, the tender. These parts of him, often buried under layers of masculine expectation, begin to emerge when the relationship he's in feels spacious enough to hold them. He no longer fears that showing his whole self will result in rejection or disconnection. Instead, he begins to trust that his full humanity is welcome. And that trust becomes the ground for a much deeper, richer connection. But when this need goes unmet, when he feels chosen only in moments of success or usefulness, it begins to erode his inner life. He may start to overperform, to overgive, to overcompensate just to maintain love. Or he may begin to shut down emotionally, believing that who he truly is will never be enough. He may even distance himself not out of lack of love, but from the belief that love must be earned endlessly and never received freely. This inner struggle can be invisible to those around him, but it is powerful. And yet, when someone chooses him, again and again, without demanding that he wear a mask, it becomes a form of healing. It allows him to step into a version of himself that is fuller, more honest, and more connected, not just with others, but with his own truth. Because at the heart of it, all he's ever wanted is to be loved, not for his performance, but for his presence. When we strip away the expectations, the roles, and the constant pressure to perform, what remains at the core of every man is not a craving for power, control, or even sex. It is a quiet, aching desire to be understood, accepted, and deeply valued. Beneath the surface lies a longing to feel emotionally safe, to be respected without conditions, to be trusted with his truth. and to be chosen not for what he does, but for who he truly is. He wants to matter in a way that isn't based on performance, but on presence. He wants to love and be loved without masks, without fear, and without having to earn his worth over and over again. These needs are not signs of weakness, they are signs of deep humanity. And when these emotional desires are met, he doesn't just become a better partner, friend, or man. He becomes more whole, more alive, and more free to give the very love he's been holding in his heart all along.